how are you making sure people come in and understand what it is that they're experiencing?
Yeah, well, the best way to get a customer to come in is offer the previous customer an exceptional experience.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Andrew Lachlan, founder and CEO of Sauna House. In this episode, we discuss the company's modern bathhouse concept. Andrew shares how his personal journey with sobriety led him to discover the benefits of sauna and cold therapy. Plus, we talk about franchising the business, creating a tech-free space, and building community through adversity. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM provides fitness and health facilities with smart workout solutions built on its ecosystem of hardware, software, and partners. But it's more than cool tech. Their connected training experience delivers business results while helping members reach their wellness goals. If you run a gym, health club, YMCA, or any kind of fitness facility, you should check them out. Visit egym.com to learn more. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe, great to see you. Thanks for having me on today.
Really excited to chat on the podcast and share this conversation. I'm super familiar with Sauna House and really, think highly of the concept, excited about what you all are building. But maybe for folks who aren't familiar, why don't you give them the rundown both about you, about Sauna House, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. I'm Andrew, founder of Sauna House. I fell in love with sauna bathing 2012, 13. At the time, I was 2 years sober, recovering from alcoholism. And I was playing hockey, playing street hockey in San Francisco, playing tennis, eating right, had a job, but I was still really struggling with anxiety and depression. And a good friend of mine, and we reconnected. We used to play high impact sports together. And he was like, man, I'm using cold water therapy on a daily basis to help with my TMJ and my sleep apnea kind of chronic pain. I was like, okay, interesting. I'll use that for some recovery. I'll give it a go. I was a Tim Ferriss fan. So he was like, do it for 30 days, see what happens. And I did it for 30 days. And I mean, obviously, the inflammation and the uplift in mood, I noticed right after a 3-minute cold plunge, right? But it wasn't for, 30, 40, 50 days. I was like, hey, I'm feeling really good. I'm sleeping good. And then, it quickly evolved from there. I just started using communal bathing spaces in San Francisco and Europe and fell in love with the culture. And then fast forward handful of years, my wife and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina to start a family, be closer to her family. And there's big mountains there for mountain biking, which was a major requirement for me. And I had always owned small businesses, and my wife was like, "Hey, you really should just build one of these little bathhouses. I think people would love it here." And I knew at the time, like, I'm an entrepreneur through and through. Like, I just see business opportunities everywhere I look. It's kind of a problem, according to the leadership summit I went to. So I was like, okay, I'll tinker with that. I met some other bathing culture people, and we moved to Asheville, bought a house, leased the commercial building, got pregnant, and then, a year later the baby came out, and then 2 months later we opened Sauna House. And it was really well received early on. Customers were so stoked, and I felt so lucky and fortunate to have met my co-founder now, Jen. She was my first employee, and I'm not sure how I got so lucky with her. She's a wonderful woman and has evolved into be a great executive leader in the company. She was my first employee. I always said, "You run the place and I'll make sure people come in the door." And that's kind of still the case. She's our chief operating officer, and I'm procuring the future for the brand. And so it's been really cool. Obviously, we had a big bump with COVID there, and so coming back from COVID was tough. But in 2022, we decided to franchise the concept. We started selling in 2023, and yeah, now it's like, what's going on? We sold 16 territories. We have 9 construction projects in the works right now, and new stores opening this fall. And for those of you who don't know, the sauna bathing, sauna cold plunge, bathhouse, like what industry am I even in is really the question. Am I in the gym fitness industry or am I in the absolute leisure industry? Because sauna bathing in Northern Europe is typically paired with a beer and smoked herring and perhaps a cigar or two. And people are like, "What?" Like that, but really it's about letting go and connecting with others. And I love to talk about the history of bathing culture in general. Like I always say, we all bathe somewhere somehow, and all the bathing culture came from sort of what those cultures had available to them naturally. So in Finland, there's freezing cold water and lots of birch trees. So they cut those down and build themselves little wood boxes and cook rocks and throw them in the box. And then they had freezing cold water. So they would do the birch box in freezing water. Then if you travel to Japan, you have onsen culture. They're volcanic country, so they have all these amazing mineral pools that are warm naturally. And so all of their bathing culture is surrounded around warm water and different temperatures of water. Japan didn't really bring sauna into their country until the late 1960s and early 70s, when they picked it up from the Northern European bathing cultures and decided it would be a great additional amenity to onsen culture. And so I'm super fascinated by the history of how people communally bathed, and I love building community. And so my take, you have luxury spa, you have class pass sauna cold plunge kind of guided sessions, and then you have traditional bathhouses. But at Sauna House, what you can expect is a very traditional bathhouse. So we require everyone to shower before they enter the space. And then we like to program it in a very simplistic way so that customers intuitively know what to do next. When you go to a really big bathhouse, it's a little confusing on where to go, what to do. But at Sauna House, we kind of created a circuit of showering, sauna, rinsing shower, cold pool, rest and rehydration on amazing heated furniture, tea service, and then repeating that cycle 2 to 3 times. The typical visit is anywhere between 1 hour and 3 hours at Sauna House, depending on how long you want to stay. It's a really fun culture to be a part of. I mean, I always thought I would just launch one store and raise my kids and go mountain biking, but when I fell in love with the culture and saw the momentum in the space, I really wanted to be part of it, and that's really the only reason I wanted to expand.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and it is interesting to hear, even your kind of evolution in the space from like a user experiencing it and then thinking about, okay, how do we build a business around it? And now how do you scale a business around this? You mentioned it there, like, hey, we're going to have one store, and now obviously franchising it. How has that shifted with you, with building the team, with thinking about like, okay, if we are going to franchise, and when you're making this decision, like it has to be somewhat programmatic. It has to be somewhat templated. This is how we can have controls across locations to sell this concept. It's something that somebody can like, take and run with. What was that like kind of making that switch again, both personally and within an organization to say like, okay, this is the difference between having one store or kind of HQ owned stores and franchising.
Yeah, so it happened slowly and then all at once. So it was like really it was me and Jen running the company, and then we had a fractional CFO helping us out. Then we got a bookkeeper. Then we brought on Gavin to head up marketing. Then we brought on Chris in construction and development. The team grew from really 3 or 4 people to 11 people in a year. And I'm an athlete through and through. I grew up playing lacrosse and ice hockey. I'm a team guy. I love teams. And franchising, when it was really hard for me to get around that word, to be honest. Like I'm like my ego hates the word franchise. They're just associated with low labor and low quality food, I think, and that doesn't excite me that much as someone who loves health and wellness. But when I really turned my perspective around and said, like, I love entrepreneurs, I love locally owned businesses. Franchises are mostly locally owned, especially if you're selecting local owners. And I love empowering young people to pursue their dreams. And so we built basically a team of people that built a bunch of systems, and half those team members are coaches. And we coach people on how to find real estate, negotiate LOIs, buy buildings, lease buildings. How do you build out a sauna house? These things are our smaller stores are $2.5 million projects. Our bigger stores are around $6 million projects. So these are really expensive, scary projects for young business owners. So we have some really high net worth franchisees who have been around the block, who have been great assets to us. And then we have younger operators who are putting their lives on the line, like I did when we launched our first store, to make their dreams come true and serve their community an amazing experience that I believe that just straight up it's underserved, right? Like there's not enough sauna, cold plunge, bathhouse concepts to serve the demand. And so yeah, that's kind of how we retooled it. We think of ourselves as coaches, and we've built what I would say is exceptional franchise support, especially for the age of our brand. I am very passionate about having more corporate stores. So we have two corporate stores going on right now, Durham and Charlotte, and we will do more corporate stores because, yeah, I love employing people and I love the customer, and I want to grow alongside my franchise partners with stores, not sit here and just kick back and make them do all that work. I think it's really fun to do the work.
It is a lot of work, and especially when you talk about having huge build outs. I think a lot of times too, when people think of franchising, it's like pretty templated in terms of like the location, the build out, the construction cost. They know what it's going to be like and they know how to roll it out and kind of operationalize them. Was that a consideration, saying like it's not going to be cookie cutter, so to speak? Like there are going to be different sizes and scales. And I guess what opportunities and challenges does that create when you go out there and start bringing on these partners?
Yeah, well, I'm super upfront guy, so I'm like, "Hey, we're a startup. This is high risk." I'm super creative. I believe in the customer is going to show up, but we're also extraordinarily thorough on the real estate side. The largest risk is all in construction in the real estate, right? Like that's when you're spending all the money, you don't have any money coming in, you're losing hair, like it's really stressful. So, helping guide people through that has been really rewarding. But it is, I'm just straight with people. I'm like, hey, I'm here to build a brand that's a little bit unique. I want all of our stores to be slightly different. We love adaptive reuse historical stuff, which is not the easy option. Each project is different. I mean, my team, we have an architect in house and a civil engineer in house, and we build all of our test fits. So our franchisees find a building, they send us the floor plan, and a week later we're producing test fits for them and then putting that in our spreadsheet to see what kind of model it would produce potentially, right? And but each building is unique shapes, sizes. Some have dilapidated states, some have all the power and all the water, and these things they take a ton of power, they take a ton of water, and you need drainage everywhere and anti-slip floors everywhere and dehumidification, and kind of everywhere you look it's expensive. They're just expensive build outs to get through. And yeah, it's a harrowing time, but I tell everybody up front, like, we're gonna forge a bond in this adversity, and coming out the backside, we're all gonna be the better for it.
Yeah, and there's an appeal to that both for the franchise partners and also for the customers and folks who come in, because when you look across the landscape, you talked a little bit about how you see Sauna House fitting in, but there are obviously, and this is not new, but like very high end kind of luxury social clubs, and some are even private members only with sauna, cold plunge, etc. Then there are some that are maybe more accessible, right? Where it's more infrared. You're kind of in and out. You're booking them. Yours, in terms of both the amenities, the experience, the program, has there been some type of education with consumers about that? When you think about the marketing, you mentioned you originally saying to Jen, like, "Hey, I'll make sure people come in." Like, how are you making sure people come in and understand what it is that they're experiencing?
Yeah, well, the best way to get a customer to come in is offer the previous customer an exceptional experience. I believe in value. And when you build a beautiful public bathing space, maybe it holds 30 to 50 people at one time in the public bathing area. You have access to multiple saunas, multiple cold pools at different temperatures. Some new stores have warm pools as well. There is a lot of education because there's so many different shapes and sizes of these concepts. And I think that that's one of the challenges in the American market is that we're really unfamiliar with bathing culture. So we invest a ton of time into our blog. It's one of the best online resources in sauna bathing, actually. So if you're curious about literally any topic, we're working with tons of different doctors and researchers writing lots of content to help educate the customer because there's so much different information. And truthfully, we're just like at the beginning of the research in cold water therapy. Like there's some studies, but they're pretty small in all reality, right? Like Susanna Soberg's study, people talk about it all day. It had 8 people, one person got thrown out. There's 7 candidates. Like this is not a lot of data. So the data that we have is really limited. So educating people is, to me, it's like intuitive. Like you need to listen to your own body, do what we recommend, but also be very self-aware, right? And teach people how to be aware of their own bodies in these kind of extreme temperatures because hyperthermia and hypothermia, they're both real things. Like, this extremism that just dominates the US wellness market is a really sad thing to be honest with me. And I'm anti-extreme in my business. I'm like, hey, like you can do 12 minutes in the cold plunge, but I literally don't think anything changes over being in there for 4 minutes. And there's no data that would ever say that either. So I think that being less extreme and more just comfortable and present with the people you're around when you're in these spaces is a big part of the benefits. Like, because stress and anxiety, cortisol levels, bad sleep, all of that stuff is a high performance like culture's side effects. And if you can let go and relax and enjoy your time and space without being like, I need to do this, or I should do that, or I need to do that. Anytime you have those thoughts populating in your head about work or running or whatever, it's not really that productive at the end of the day.
The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by our friends at EGYM. This is an exciting partnership for us, and not just because EGYM makes some of the most innovative fitness products out there, but because the entire EGYM team, led by their CEO Philip, is committed to making health, fitness, and well-being more accessible for everyone. And that's a mission we can get behind. By combining their smart equipment with integrated software and hundreds of connected partner brands, EGYM helps fitness facilities stand out by delivering a personalized, gamified workout experience that improves outcomes and member engagement. So if you're a gym or health club operator thinking about how to best serve your members while driving business results, go see what EGYM is up to at egym.com. It does. I've never been to a sauna house, but again, I've just followed the brand and obviously your work and familiar with the website and the positioning and all those sorts of things. And it's the brand is one of those questions. This is like, I guess, a two-part question. Like when it comes to brand, it's oftentimes like, oh, how it feels and how people think and how it resonates and all those sorts of things. Sauna House definitely does have that friendlier, more, I don't know how on a web page it can come across as like chill, but it definitely, all the things that you just described, it does come across that way, which, props to you and the team for doing that. But how do you infuse that into locations, especially when you're not there, when it's franchise partners and different employees? Because I do think that positioning is unique and it is kind of much needed, as you talk about with high performance and hustle culture. But saying that and maybe designing that and putting that on the webpage and creating that experience in person are two very different things.
So how we do that across locations is great core values. I think great companies are built with great culture and great core values. And I love Danny Myers and a bunch of hospitality people out there, but you have your shareholders. And one of my favorite ones is the employee. And a core value for our team is be real. And that's authentic hospitality in my world. I think that connecting with people over their experience, really being there for them, talking to them, listening to their concerns, answering their questions thoroughly, and really educating the new customer on how to do what we do and why we do it this way gives them a sense of confidence going into a new space that's very vulnerable, right? Like you're in a bathing suit, there's co-gender, you've never done this, it's a little weird, what's going on? And so our team does a really great job at educating the new customer on what to expect for their first visit. And, they're ideally being very real with that customer through the onboarding. But, scaling and hospitality is absolutely a challenge. And we'll see really how it goes to maintain high quality. When I go into my business early in the morning and I see our cleaners working, if there's a new cleaner on shift, I'll go up and introduce myself and I'll say, "Thank you so much for being here. You're literally the foundation of everything we do." Right? No one would pay to be here if this facility was not clean. And I think that cleanliness and great hospitality are core to our business. And so, as long as our regional managers and our GMs can instill great leadership into our guest service coordinators, that quality should remain high, ideally. And we'll see. We'll be visiting stores all the time and, grading programs and all of those things to keep quality up. But it's absolutely a challenge. Scaling hospitality is a challenge.
The other side of that, I mentioned kind of like two parts: brand and experience, but then also community, communal bathhouse, and obviously some type of social experience. Some people like that, some people don't. You offer private experiences as well. But how do you just think about like this idea of building community and again, teaching other people to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Building community is a unique thing. Like, again, there's say a brand like Othership that's doing class guided sessions. I think those are awesome. I love Othership, great brand. That's one way to build community. Another way to build community is through the intentionality of the experience. I always say, I said it already once on the pod, but bonds are forged in adversity. And when you have this programming of rotating between circuits like we do at Sauna House, you're saunaing and cold plunging with new people that are strangers. And without a coach in that environment, new strangers become the coach to a new person, and they're helping each other through a cold water therapy, and they're coaching each other through a longer sauna sit. It's like really humid and they're drenching, and they're celebrating each other. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. And they're doing this without technology, right? So we calculate tech free hours that we produce. Last year, we produced 7.6 years of technology free time. And I'm really excited about the future of technology free spaces, because I think we've all noticed, like, man, to make six figures and not be on a screen 10 hours a day is very difficult. And how do we counterbalance the demands of the modern world and the speed of the modern world? And I think that this ancient practice is like literally a remedy to the demands of the modern world. It's so good for the nervous system, it's so good for the mind, the body, all of those things, right? Like, there's humans want to feel good, right? And there's really four states of consciousness. And I got this from Sam Harris, because I love meditation, breath work, and mindfulness and all these things. But you have the mind restless and the body comfortable. You have the mind restless and the body uncomfortable. Then you have the body comfortable and the mind restless, or you have a state of harmony between body and mind where you have a sense of ease or pain free or a lack of suffering. So many of us are trying to get into that fourth most desirable state of consciousness, but we're doing it by seeking pleasure and dopamine without effort. And so we're cutting ahead of the line. We're going backwards. We're throwing in pills. We're trying to have a drink. Whatever it might be to try and get ourselves to that fourth state of consciousness. But when you do 2 rounds of sauna and cold therapy with no cell phone in your hand, like 90 plus percent of our customers are leaving in the fourth state of consciousness, which is the most desirable one. And they're also doing something hard to get all that norepinephrine and dopamine. Like doing a cold plunge is hard, right? So they're earning the reward of feeling that way. And they're really rewiring, the brain and the dopamine reward system, in my opinion, which is why, it's been super helpful for people in recovery to do sauna and cold therapy. I've been lucky to be sober for almost 12 years. And for me, it really helps recenter me. I mean, there's lots of tactics and different ways to do it, right? Breath work, mindfulness, sauna, cold therapy, but those are all really passive, great ways to recenter the body and the mind. And I think sauna and cold therapy is just a really good one.
I think a lot of what you're talking about certainly resonates with me. Sounds like we have a lot of shared values and interests as it relates to all those things, and meditation, breath work, and kind of seeking this balance when we are maybe pulled in this direction. Also, as a athlete and super competitive and entrepreneur, like all those things. So maybe trying to go the other way. And I know for myself and maybe for other people, like to have this conversation directly about letting go and having, maybe doing less, which is counterintuitive. They might not be receptive to it. It might not resonate. They might not want that. But going and having this experience, it more naturally happens and they kind of get that result without necessarily having to have that tough conversation or realization. Do you think about like how to do those things and whether or not it matters that they get this other side of it with like the realization, but they get the outcome, or when it makes sense to do that, or if you even do that as part of sauna house?
Yeah, I think that that's very interesting. And I love the sort of sneak attack on them per se. Like you do a couple rounds sonical therapy, they're not thinking about the fact that they're letting go, right? But I think at the end of the experience, when they feel this way, they can reflect back on, hey man, wow, like I really don't feel compulsive right now. I don't feel like I need to grab my phone or grab that sugar or grab that caffeine. I just feel content. Man, this feels good. And they're able to actually be aware of like what that even feels like. I think a lot of people have no idea what that feels like on a regular basis, which is like, quite frankly, very sad. I would love for more people to experience this state of consciousness and get there in a way that isn't cutting corners. And I always say like, hey, if they come out feeling pain free and they're not suffering mentally or physically, like they're probably going to make the next best choice, right? Like instead of going and binging on sugar, I think the likelihood of them going and having something like nutrient dense is much higher, right? And when you feel good, you want to keep feeling good, right? That's why, for me, like when I used to drink, I was like, I feel good. I had one, I'll have two, I'll keep feeling better. I'll have three, I'll be even better. We all want to keep feeling better. And so my hope is that people can do this and feel better and then continue to make passive choices, which in my experience, removing things from my life has been the highest value add, not adding things, right? And so, like for instance, when I go gravel bike riding or mountain bike riding, sometimes I'll wear my headphones on big climbs and listen to music or a podcast or a book on tape. And but I'm so hyperstimulated, like my coach was like, "Bro, you gotta just take those out and just be with nature," right? And I'm like, "God, but like I really need to get through this book. I'm trying to learn something or whatever." And but when I do, I just notice like, wow, I'm so like much more relaxed riding out here. I feel so much more comfortable in my body and my mind when I'm not with my AirPods in, going up the mountain. So yeah, it's still a practice for me too.
There's also, maybe related to that, a lot of these things are ancient rituals, and they are, you describe so many different cultures and rooted in tradition and all the different kind of thought that has gone into that, and now we are in many ways like modernizing them, and that's a consumer experience, and consumer behavior and sentiment and all those things shift. So how important is it to keep them the tradition that they were, cold plunge and sauna and communal bathhouse, versus weighing that with like adapting to customer behavior expectations, shifting kind of wellness trends in this sense. Maybe that necessarily hasn't happened yet, but as the business continues to go, say 10 years on, like how much do you think you'll have to shift that programming based on maybe what people want and don't want, and how do you balance that with like the tradition ritual of it?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't know yet, but I do know that we used to do 2-hour visits only, which, back in the day, people would be at the baths for a long time. Now, though, the modern person just doesn't have all these big blocks of time to be doing this. And there's a real utilitarianism to our experience at Sauna House. And so 1-hour visits we unleashed last year, and they're wildly popular because they just program, like, people are programmed to say, I have 1 hour for a hit class at Metabolic or CrossFit or whatever. I have 1 hour, I can sneak it in, and they'll do it more often with a 1-hour walk-in, and so we made that available to our customers, and they love it. We were really worried it would damage the experience of the 2-hour customer because now there's these people that wanna move faster, and it's a different vibe than the 2-hour vibe, and we were worried that that could damage the experience, and we're still very conscious of it, so we limit the hours of hot laps, and nights and weekends, they're probably not available as much. But I really am passionate about the future of performance in our space, and I think that that's gonna evolve really rapidly. There's still really lacking data here, right? But I've worked with different performance endurance athletes with their coaches and said, like, "Oh, here's where I would layer in sauna. Here's where I would layer in cold. Here's where I'd layer them both in together." And then we see how the athletes are performing and recovering and see if layering in sauna cold water in that way is the most impactful. So I think where it's going to go is, say you fill out something like, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm at in my wellness journey. This is my desired results. And then it's like, hey, I think maybe you program it like this a little bit more. And so I'm pretty flexible as far as like results are results, right? And so there's an ancient study of bathology that is actually very complicated, right? It's like, hey, you've got an appendicitis, which I didn't even know what it was. You've got stomach pain. Well, you need to do 97 degrees in this pool and then 72 degrees in this pool for 5 minutes. And based on the ailment, they would write the prescription of bathology, right? Like, here, you talk to the bathology expert, tell them what's going on, and they give you a prescription to heal. And I think that, the ancients were actually doing that. And I think that we'll be doing that with more precision going forward once we can gather more data.
As we get towards the end of the conversation and kind of like look ahead, a number of projects in the pipeline, a couple of corporate stores also being developed. Like, what's top of mind for you? Whether that's you're excited about or challenges or what you're talking to the team about, just like what's top of mind?
Yeah, so 2023's big word was sell. 2024's big word is execute. So we talk about execution a lot right now for our corporate stores and for our franchise partners. And what's top of mind for me is, well, I think about the different shareholders. So there's different things top of mind for different shareholders within the brand. From our frontline workers, I have some very top of line things on the horizon, like profit sharing at the Asheville store next year for our front desk team. That's a big one that we've been working on to present for them for 2025. I'm working with new shareholders at the parent company for the first time, which is exciting for my personal growth. And so I've been learning about managing the board and executive leadership and training. And so I'm always working on becoming a better leader, becoming a better speaker. So on an individual level, I'm thinking about those things. And then on my team, I'm always just doubling down on 80/20. I'm like, guys, what's the 20% of things that are giving you 80% of the value, right? Like the value that you deliver to all of our shareholders. It's usually the 80/20 principle, right? So it's 20% of the things they're doing are delivering 80% of that value, and say no to more stuff. Like, don't start new things without real thought. again, like that starts here. As a creative dreamer, I'm the number one person that takes people's time and attention in the wrong direction at times. So I've learned a lot about myself in that way. But top of mind is just execute and continue to deliver results for our franchise partners through the rest of the year. And that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess, I was going to say, where should people follow along or reach out, or where would you point them? But given the kind of different shareholders, I don't know if there's one location or kind of multiple things, but yeah, I would say just for folks who are interested and want to learn more about Sauna House, where should they go?
Sure. Yeah, saunahouse.com is the best place to go. We have a franchise page you can get to from the bottom. We have employment opportunities if you would like to be one of our team members. If you'd like to learn about the topic, our wellness blog is a really, really rich resource guide, and I encourage people to go discover things in there if they'd like to.
Yeah, and hopefully them starting with this conversation, we'll make sure everything's linked up in the show notes, and really excited to share it with the audience. Thanks for making time today.
Yeah, Joe, I really appreciate you having me on. I mean, I remember the first time we talked, I was standing in Sauna House. We were closed. It was COVID. It was dark. I was not in the best headspace. I remember getting off the call with you and going, "Man, you were just not in it right there, Andrew." And I'm really happy to be talking to you again 4 years later. Watching what you guys have done and watching what Sauna House has done the last few years is really fun to be part of both stories.
Absolutely. And we just got to keep it going. And well, I'll steal your word, execute, continue to execute and keep it going. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you got value from the conversation, please consider subscribing and sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It's a massive help. And if you want more content like this, including news and insights on the latest industry developments, subscribe to the Fitt Insider newsletter at insider.fit.co. And one more thing, you can learn more about our recruiting and consulting services at fit.co. That's FITT.co. I'll see you here next week.